In 2013, Aaron Hernandez was at the peak of fame. A tight end for the New England Patriots, he had the talent, the money, and the future most athletes could only dream of. But behind the million-dollar contracts and the roaring crowds, there was a man fighting demons that fame could not hide. That year, his name would shift from headlines about touchdowns to headlines about murder. The victim, Odin Lloyd. The motive, buried under lies, paranoia, and violence. Aaron Hernandez grew up in Bristol, Connecticut. His father, Dennis Hernandez, was a respected man in the community, strict, athletic, and determined to see his son succeed. But when Dennis died suddenly from complications after hernia surgery, Aaron was just 16. That loss shattered him. He drifted toward trouble, hanging out with the wrong crowd, experimenting with drugs, and showing early signs of aggression. At the University of Florida, where he became a standout player under coach Urban Meyer, talent outweighed discipline. Multiple fights and off-field issues were quietly brushed aside because of one fact: he could win games. In 2010, the New England Patriots drafted Hernandez. He became one of Tom Brady's most reliable receivers, forming a deadly duo with fellow tight end Rob Gronkowski. Fans loved him, coaches praised him. In public, he was charming and focused. In private, he was volatile, paranoid, and increasingly violent. He built a mansion in North Attleboro, Massachusetts, and surrounded himself with friends from his old neighborhood, men with criminal records and street reputations. That decision would become fatal. The murder of Odin Lloyd took place on June 17, 2013. Lloyd was a semi-professional football player and the boyfriend of Hernandez's fiance's sister. Just days before the murder, Lloyd had attended a nightclub with Hernandez and two of his friends. Something happened that night, something that made Hernandez believe Lloyd had disrespected or betrayed him. What followed was a calculated act of revenge. Surveillance footage later showed Hernandez driving a rented silver Nissan Altima with two friends, Ernest Wallace and Carlos Ortiz, in the early morning hours. They picked up Lloyd from his house in Boston. Hours later, Lloyd was found dead in an industrial park less than a mile from Hernandez's home, shot 6 times. The evidence against Hernandez was overwhelming. Security cameras from his mansion showed him holding a gun shortly after the time of the murder. His own home surveillance system, his rental car, and cell phone pings traced his movements to and from the crime scene. A .45 caliber shell casing found in his car matched the bullets used to kill Lloyd. Despite his fame and money, Hernandez couldn't escape the digital trail. When police arrived at his home, they found him calm but defiant. He thought his celebrity status could protect him. It didn't. On June 26, 2013, Aaron Hernandez was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The New England Patriots released him within hours. The team that once celebrated his talent now wanted nothing to do with him. The trial was a spectacle. Prosecutors painted him as a man who lived a double life, a professional athlete on the field, a violent criminal off it. The motive was never entirely clear, but the pattern was control, anger, and fear of betrayal. Witnesses described his paranoia, his obsession with loyalty, and his unpredictable temper. In April 2015, he was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. While behind bars, Hernandez's life spiraled further. He was tried again in 2017 for a separate double homicide, but was acquitted. Just days later, on April 19, 2017, Aaron Hernandez was found dead in his prison cell, hanging from a bedsheet. He was 27 years old. Reports later revealed that he suffered from severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, a degenerative brain disease linked to repeated head injuries in football. It likely contributed to his mood swings, paranoia, and violent behavior. Aaron Hernandez's story remains one of the darkest chapters in sports history. A man with everything, talent, fame, and fortune, lost it all because of anger, poor choices, and untreated trauma. His fall from grace wasn't just about a murder. It was about the dangerous intersection of fame, mental health, and violence. The question that still lingers: if someone had intervened earlier, could any of it have been prevented? So far, we've heard about one of the most shocking crimes in NFL history, the downfall of Aaron Hernandez. But Hernandez isn't alone. The league has seen several players fall from grace in ways that stunned fans, teammates, and the entire sports world. In this video, we'll look at more cases where fame and violence collided, where athletes who once inspired millions became symbols of tragedy and crime. We'll move through these stories in no particular order. Each case is unique, unpredictable, and unsettling in its own way. Keeping them random helps capture the chaos these events created within the NFL community, because crime doesn't follow a pattern, and neither did these players. Some of these men were rising stars. Others were veterans at the top of their game. Yet, for each of them, one decision or moment of rage changed everything. They lost more than contracts or endorsements. They lost their freedom, their reputations, and, in some cases, their humanity. The impact reached far beyond the field. Fans questioned their heroes. Teams faced scrutiny. The league was forced to confront uncomfortable truths about violence, mental health, and accountability. These are not just stories of athletes losing their careers. They are stories of lives lost, justice served, and consequences faced. Every crime left scars, on victims, on families, and on a sport that prides itself on discipline and strength. Let's dive into the dark side of the NFL and uncover how fame, power, and poor choices turned victory into tragedy. Case 2. Michael Vick. Michael Vick was once the most electrifying quarterback in the NFL, a dynamic player with unmatched speed and agility, whose ability to make plays with his legs and arm captivated fans across the country. As the face of the Atlanta Falcons, Vick seemed poised to lead the franchise into the future. He was the highest-paid player in the league, a superstar with an undeniable talent that had the NFL on its toes. But in 2007, his world came crashing down in a way that no one could have predicted. The crime that shattered Vick's career was one of the most grotesque and inhumane: his involvement in a brutal dog-fighting ring. The operation, named Bad News Kennels, was a hellish empire operating out of a property Vick owned in Surry County, Virginia. It was there that Vick, along with several associates, not only financed but actively participated in the illegal and horrific practice of dogfighting. The FBI investigation into Bad News Kennels revealed shocking details. The operation involved training dogs to fight in gruesome battles for sport and profit. The dogs, primarily pit bulls, were forced into violent combat, often to the death. Dogs that did not perform to Vick's brutal standards were executed, sometimes in sadistic ways: drowning, hanging, and even electrocution. The evidence that emerged painted a picture of extreme cruelty, with Vick directly involved in the killings of several dogs who failed to meet the requirements of the fight. These were not isolated incidents, but part of a systematic abuse that had been going on for years. When the investigation unraveled, Vick was arrested in 2007, charged with multiple felonies related to dog fighting, including conspiracy to engage in a dog fighting operation and animal cruelty. The media and public reaction was swift and unforgiving. The man who had once been a beloved sports icon was now the face of one of the most heinous crimes associated with the NFL. Vick pled guilty to the charges and was sentenced to 23 months in federal prison in December 2007, a punishment that reflected the seriousness of the crime. The NFL's response was as swift as the public's outrage. The league suspended Vick indefinitely without pay, and the Atlanta Falcons, who had once celebrated his incredible talent, cut ties with him. Sponsors pulled their deals, and Vick's reputation seemed permanently tarnished. In the court of public opinion, Vick's crime wasn't just about breaking the law. It was about betraying the trust of millions of fans who had looked up to him. The NFL, too, faced the challenge of deciding whether it could allow a convicted animal abuser back into the league. But Vick's story didn't end with his prison sentence. After serving 21 months, Vick was released from prison in 2009 and began the long and uncertain process of rebuilding his life. Public opinion was divided. Many believed he should never play again, while others argued he had paid his debt to society and deserved a second chance. In 2009, Vick was reinstated by the NFL, signing a one-year contract with the Philadelphia Eagles. His return to the NFL was seen as a redemption story, but not without its share of controversy. Vick would go on to have a successful stint with the Eagles, even earning a Pro Bowl selection in 2010, and later playing for the New York Jets. His career in the NFL was not the same as it had been before. The dazzling plays were fewer, and his reputation was forever tainted. But for many, His return represented a chance at redemption, not just as a player, but as a man who had made terrible mistakes and paid the price. Vick's post-NFL life also included advocacy work for animal rights and speaking out about the horrors of dogfighting. He worked with organizations like the Humane Society, using his platform to speak out against the practice that had once consumed him. In many ways, Vick became a symbol of both the destructive power of fame and the possibility of personal transformation. He never fully regained the adoration of fans or sponsors, but he did manage to carve out a path of redemption, one that involved publicly acknowledging his wrongdoing and using his experience to teach others. The public's reaction to Vick's redemption arc was mixed. Some accepted his efforts to make amends, while others remained steadfast in their belief that his crimes were unforgivable. But one thing was certain: Michael Vick's story would always be remembered as one of the darkest chapters in NFL history. From the pinnacle of his career to the depths of scandal and incarceration, Vick's journey through the criminal justice system and back to the NFL proved that even the most talented athletes could fall victim to the very violence they once entertained. Case 3. Rae Carruth. Rae Carruth was once one of the most promising young stars in the NFL, a wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers with a reputation for speed, agility, and potential. In 1997, his future seemed limitless as he was drafted in the first round of the NFL Draft, a promising addition to the Panthers. On the field, he was fast, skilled, and had all the traits of a player who could build a career that would be remembered for years. But behind that talent, a dark and sinister side was waiting to surface, one that would forever change his life, the lives of his family, and the life of an innocent woman. In 1999, Carruth's promising career took a catastrophic turn when it was revealed that he was the mastermind behind one of the most chilling murder conspiracies in sports history: the murder of his pregnant girlfriend, Cherika Adams. Cherika, a 24-year-old woman who was 8 months pregnant with Carruth's child, had been dating him for some time. But their relationship had become strained, and Carruth, desperate to avoid fatherhood and the responsibility that came with it, took extreme measures. On the evening of November 16, 1999, Cherika Adams was driving through Charlotte, North Carolina, when her car was deliberately run off the road by another vehicle. The assailant, hired by Carruth, shot her multiple times as she sat in her car, leaving her to fight for her life. Cherika was rushed to the hospital, where she clung to life for several days. Despite her injuries, she was determined to save her unborn son. She underwent emergency surgery, but the battle was almost too much to bear. In the hospital, Cherika fought not just for her own life, but for the life of her child, who was later named Chancellor Lee Adams. Tragically, despite her bravery, Cherika Adams passed away 4 days later from her injuries. But before she died, Cherika was able to tell investigators about the events leading up to the attack. She named Rae Carruth as the person responsible for orchestrating the murder and identified him as the mastermind behind the plot. Carruth's involvement in the crime was both chilling and methodical. He had hired a group of men to carry out the murder, ensuring that Adams would be killed before she could give birth. Carruth's goal was to prevent her from having their child, a decision that was fueled by his fear of responsibility and the potential damage to his career. After the shooting, Carruth attempted to flee the scene, even going as far as to hide in a friend's house to avoid capture. His callousness in abandoning Adams to die, and his actions afterward, painted him as a man more concerned with his own future than the life of his girlfriend or their unborn son. Carruth was eventually arrested and charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and other related charges. The trial was a media sensation, with many shocked by the details of the crime and the fact that someone with such a promising career would descend into such darkness. The jury found Carruth guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, and he was sentenced to 18 to 24 years in prison for his role in the death of Cherika Adams and the harm caused to her son, Chancellor. The shocking nature of this crime, particularly in the context of Carruth's career, made it even harder to comprehend. This wasn't a case of an athlete caught up in a moment of rage or impulsive violence. This was a calculated, premeditated act. A man with so much potential, so much opportunity, had chosen to sacrifice the life of an innocent woman and her child to protect his own future. Carruth's legal battles were intense. He spent years in prison, serving time while his name became synonymous with betrayal and violence. Throughout his incarceration, Carruth's attempts at redemption were few and far between. He tried to appeal his conviction, arguing that he had not intended for Taylor.A to die, but the courts upheld his sentence. In 2018, after serving 19 years in prison, Carruth was released on parole. His release sparked outrage among those who felt he had not paid enough for the crime he committed. Yet, during his time in prison, Carruth had expressed remorse for his actions, though his sincerity was often questioned. Carruth's story remains one of the darkest examples of an athlete's fall from grace, a stark reminder of the devastating consequences that come with actions driven by selfishness and violence. Rae Carruth had everything: a bright future in the NFL, fame, and wealth. But he chose a path that led to the death of an innocent woman and a life filled with regret. The tragedy of Taylor.A Adams and the life of her son, Chancellor, is a painful reminder that not all athletes use their platform for good, and sometimes the cost of their crimes is far too high to ever be truly forgiven. Case 4. Will Smith. Will Smith was a beloved defensive lineman for the New Orleans Saints, known not only for his prowess on the field, but also for his infectious personality off of it. Smith's career in the NFL spanned over a decade, and he had become a fixture in the New Orleans community, respected by teammates, fans, and friends alike. But in 2016, his life was tragically cut short in a shocking road rage incident that sent ripples through the NFL and left his loved ones devastated. On the night of April 9, 2016, Will Smith and his wife, Raquel, were driving home after a night out with friends in New Orleans. The night would end in horror, as the couple became involved in a confrontation with another driver, Hernandez. What began as a minor road rage incident quickly escalated into an act of senseless violence. According to reports, Hayes, who was driving behind Smith's car, rear-ended Smith's vehicle at a stoplight. A heated exchange followed, with Smith getting out of his car to confront Hayes. In the midst of the confrontation, Hayes pulled out a gun and fired multiple shots at Smith. Tragically, Smith was struck multiple times, including in the back, and he died in front of his wife and friends. The fact that Smith's death happened in such a public and senseless manner, in front of people who cared deeply about him, made the tragedy even harder to comprehend. His wife, Raquel, was left to witness the brutal murder of her husband, and the Saints lost not just a teammate, but a friend and leader on the field. The shooting sent shockwaves through the NFL, with players, coaches, and fans expressing their shock and grief. Will Smith was more than just a defensive lineman. He was a beloved figure who had contributed to the Saints' 2009 Super Bowl win and had become a cornerstone of the franchise. His death was felt deeply by the New Orleans community, which had already been through so much in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. Hayes was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, but during the trial, his defense team argued that the shooting was a result of self-defense following the altercation. In 2017, Hayes was convicted of manslaughter after a lengthy trial. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison for the crime. Will Smith's death left a permanent emotional scar on the Saints and the NFL community. Teammates, coaches, and fans all struggled to come to terms with the loss of such a vibrant, respected figure. His tragic end served as a reminder of how a moment of rage can take away a life, a career, and a family in an instant. The pain of that loss still echoes today, and Smith's legacy lives on in the hearts of those who remember the man who once dominated the field with his heart and soul. As we reflect on the violent end of Will Smith, it becomes clear that sports are not immune to the violence that plagues society. This case, like the others we've discussed, shows how anger and poor decision-making can have devastating consequences. And with that, let's move on to another story, a different kind of tragedy, but one that also changed the course of an athlete's life forever. Case 5. Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy was once one of the NFL's most feared defenders, a physical presence on the field with a reputation for dominating opposing offensive lines. As a defensive end for the Carolina Panthers, Hardy had built a career around his brute strength, speed, and relentless drive. But in 2014, his promising career came to a sudden halt, not because of his performance on the field, but because of a violent and disturbing incident off it that would forever change his life and legacy. In May of 2014, Hardy was arrested and charged with assaulting his ex-girlfriend, Nicole Holder. The details of the crime were shocking and disturbing. Hardy allegedly threw Holder onto a couch covered in firearms, a terrifying act of intimidation. She reported that he choked her, threw her into a bathtub, and even threatened to kill her. According to Holder, the assault was not a moment of anger. It was premeditated and violent, designed to intimidate and control her. Hardy was initially arrested and charged with domestic violence, and the case quickly attracted national attention. The disturbing nature of the allegations was compounded by the fact that Hardy was an NFL star, a man who had the platform and power to influence the public. Hardy's arrest and the charges against him were a stark reminder of the violence that can exist behind closed doors, even among those who are admired for their physical strength. The legal proceedings that followed were equally troubling. Hardy's case went to trial, but in 2015, it was dismissed after Holder failed to appear in court, leading to the charges being dropped. However, the absence of a trial did not exonerate Hardy in the court of public opinion. The NFL, in response to the allegations, decided to suspend Hardy for 10 games for violating the league's personal conduct policy, although this suspension was later reduced to 4 games on appeal. Despite the legal outcomes, the NFL's handling of the case raised significant questions about the league's stance on domestic violence, and many felt that Hardy's suspension was far too lenient given the severity of the allegations. When Hardy was reinstated, it was clear that the league's response had not been enough to protect his career. Although he had shown promise as one of the league's top defenders, the backlash from the public and the media was severe. His return to the NFL, this time with the Dallas Cowboys, was mired in controversy. Fans, teammates, and sports analysts all questioned whether a man with such a violent past should be allowed back on the field. The Cowboys gave Hardy a 1-year contract, but his performance was inconsistent, and his presence on the team was overshadowed by the negative attention surrounding his personal life. Hardy's public image took a hit from which he never fully recovered. Once seen as one of the NFL's brightest stars, he became a symbol of the league's failure to address domestic violence issues. His career trajectory changed dramatically, and after a season with the Cowboys, he was not offered a new contract. His return to the NFL had been marked by constant controversy, and his reputation had been permanently damaged. Hardy's violent actions, combined with the NFL's relatively lenient response, led many to question whether the league truly understood the gravity of domestic violence and its impact on both victims and the players involved. The fallout from the Hardy case was far-reaching, affecting not just his career, but also the NFL's public image. Critics argued that the league's handling of the case sent the wrong message to players and fans alike, that personal misconduct could be overlooked or minimized if a player's on-field talent was high enough. The case also sparked a broader conversation about how professional sports organizations deal with violence off the field and whether the punishment is proportional to the crime. Greg Hardy's story is a tragic example of how success on the field can be overshadowed by personal failings off it. His domestic violence case and the subsequent fallout left a lasting impact on his career and on the NFL as a whole. He went from being one of the league's most feared defenders to a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked anger and the need for stricter accountability within the league. As we reflect on Hardy's fall from grace, we are reminded of how personal violence can destroy not only a player's career, but also their legacy. This case, like so many others, highlights the importance of addressing issues of domestic violence within professional sports. As we move forward, let's look at another case where violence off the field shattered not just a career, but an entire life. Case 6: Lawrence Taylor. Lawrence Taylor, one of the most dominant linebackers in NFL history, was feared by quarterbacks and admired by fans. Known for his ferocious playing style and incredible athleticism, Taylor revolutionized the linebacker position and became a 2-time Super Bowl champion, a 10-time Pro Bowler, and a Hall of Famer. His name was synonymous with success on the field. But in 2011, that reputation was shattered when Taylor became the center of one of the most disturbing criminal cases to ever involve a former NFL star. In May 2011, Taylor was arrested and charged with the sexual assault of a 16-year-old girl in a New York hotel. The circumstances surrounding the crime were both shocking and chilling. Taylor had hired the young woman, who was a prostitute, to have sex with him in his hotel room. What initially seemed like a case of consensual adult interaction quickly turned into something much darker. Authorities later revealed that the girl was underage and had been trafficked by her pimp, who had forced her into a life of sexual exploitation. Taylor, fully aware of her age, paid the young woman for sex, knowing that she was not of legal consent. The arrest came as a surprise to many. Taylor, who had been known for his reckless behavior and past brushes with the law, was now facing charges that would go far beyond any of his previous offenses. He was not just an athlete caught up in a scandal. He was now a convicted criminal, facing charges that would result in a conviction for sexual assault of a minor. The facts of the case were undeniable. Taylor had abused his power and fame, taking advantage of a vulnerable young girl. The legal proceedings that followed were swift. Taylor was charged with third-degree rape, patronizing a prostitute, and engaging in sexual misconduct. In 2011, he pleaded guilty to a felony charge of sexual misconduct and was sentenced to 6 years of probation, along with 1,000 hours of community service. While Taylor avoided a lengthy prison sentence, the damage to his personal life and legacy was irreversible. The reaction from the public was swift and unforgiving. Fans who had once idolized Taylor now saw him as a predator. His actions had crossed a line that most people could not reconcile. A man who had once been a hero to millions, a legend in the NFL, had become a criminal. A man whose actions had destroyed not only his own life, but also the life of an innocent victim. The NFL, which had always been quick to distance itself from controversy, was forced to address the issue head-on. Taylor's Hall of Fame status and his legacy in the NFL were now under scrutiny, with many questioning how someone who had achieved so much could fall so far. For Taylor, the consequences went beyond legal penalties. The fallout from the case affected his personal relationships, his career, and his public image. No longer the celebrated NFL legend, Taylor was now labeled a criminal. His role as a commentator for the NFL Network was terminated, and his name was frequently brought up in conversations about the darker side of professional sports. Even his friends and family were left to grapple with the fact that the man they once admired had been involved in one of the most despicable crimes imaginable. Despite the legal consequences and the public backlash, Taylor attempted to rebuild his life after the case. He spent years in therapy and sought help for his personal demons, acknowledging his past mistakes and attempting to make amends for the harm he had caused. He has since expressed regret for his actions and worked to repair his public image, though many still find it difficult to forgive him for the crime he committed. The story of Lawrence Taylor is a tragic one, marked by the stark contrast between his legendary status on the field and his criminal actions off it. His legacy as one of the NFL's greatest players is forever tarnished by his conviction for sexual assault. Taylor's story serves as a painful reminder that no one, no matter how successful, is immune to the consequences of their actions. The impact of his crime, both on his life and on the young girl he exploited, will never be forgotten. As we reflect on the fall of Lawrence Taylor, we must acknowledge the importance of accountability in both sports and society. While Taylor's career achievements are undeniable, they do not excuse the harm he caused. This case, like others we've discussed, illustrates the profound impact that violence and abuse can have on the lives of others, and how no one, no matter their stature, should be above the law. Next, we'll take a look at another player whose life was derailed by criminal actions, one whose crimes, though different, still left an indelible mark on the NFL and the world of professional sports. Case 7. Antonio Cromartie. Antonio Cromartie, known for his skills as a cornerback in the NFL, played for several teams throughout his career, including the San Diego Chargers, New York Jets, and Indianapolis Colts. On the field, he was celebrated for his ability to shut down opposing receivers, with multiple Pro Bowl selections and a reputation for making big plays. However, off the field, Cromartie's career was marred by multiple allegations of domestic violence, which would forever alter how the public and the NFL viewed him. The first of these allegations surfaced in 2010, when Cromartie's ex-wife, who had already been involved in a tumultuous relationship with the player, accused him of domestic violence. She claimed that during an argument, Cromartie physically assaulted her, leaving her with visible injuries. Despite these accusations, no criminal charges were ever filed, and the case was not pursued further. But the damage had already been done. Cromartie's name became linked with allegations of violence, and public perception of him began to shift. In 2013, another woman came forward with allegations against Cromartie, accusing him of assaulting her during a confrontation at a hotel. While these claims were taken seriously by the media, again, no criminal charges were filed, and the case did not lead to a conviction. But the pattern of accusations against Cromartie continued to paint a troubling picture. Multiple women came forward, with each allegation revealing a deeper history of troubling behavior in his personal life. These incidents were not isolated events. They were part of a broader narrative of violence against women that was now associated with Cromartie. Although Cromartie never faced a criminal conviction for any of the allegations, the sheer number of accusations against him raised serious concerns about his character and conduct. As the allegations continued to mount, Cromartie's reputation suffered. The NFL, which had already faced criticism for its handling of domestic violence issues following the Ray Rice incident, was forced to address the growing concerns about Cromartie. However, the league's response was often criticized as inconsistent, with many questioning why Cromartie was allowed to continue his career without facing any disciplinary action. The lack of a criminal conviction made it difficult for the NFL to take strong action against Cromartie, but the growing public outcry over the repeated allegations led to significant fallout. Teams began to shy away from signing him, and Cromartie's career suffered as a result. He was eventually released by the New York Jets in 2015, and his time in the NFL gradually came to an end. Though he briefly returned to the league in 2015, he was never able to regain his previous form, and his career trajectory was forever altered by the allegations. Public perception of Cromartie took a serious hit. Fans and analysts who had once praised his athletic abilities were now forced to grapple with the repeated accusations of violence. The allegations left a lasting stain on his legacy, overshadowing his achievements as a player. Even without a criminal conviction, Cromartie's name became synonymous with domestic violence, and his career, which had shown so much promise, was forever linked to controversy. While Cromartie's case did not result in a criminal conviction, the repeated allegations, combined with the lack of clear consequences from the NFL, left many wondering if the league was truly committed to addressing the issue of domestic violence. The NFL's failure to take decisive action sent a message to players and fans that violence against women, when not criminally prosecuted, could be ignored or downplayed, allowing athletes like Cromartie to continue their careers despite serious allegations. As we reflect on Antonio Cromartie's story, we see how multiple allegations, even without convictions, can shape a player's career and legacy. His story highlights the complex intersection of accusations, public opinion, and the league's response to off-field misconduct. Cromartie's case is another example of how the NFL and the public must wrestle with the broader issue of domestic violence and the consequences it has on the lives of the victims, the players, and the league itself. Now, as we move to another case, we'll explore a tragic story where violence led to a player's complete fall from grace. This next chapter takes us deeper into the NFL's troubled history with off-field incidents, where the consequences were far-reaching, not just for the athlete, but for everyone involved. Case 8. Shawn Oakman. Shawn Oakman was once one of the most talked-about prospects in college football. A dominant defensive end for Baylor University, Oakman stood out with his impressive size, at 6 feet 7 inches and over 270 pounds, and his ability to disrupt opposing offenses. He was a star in the making, often compared to some of the NFL's most physically gifted players. With his talent, Oakman was expected to be a top draft pick, and many saw him as a future force in the NFL. But in 2016, Oakman's promising career was derailed by a disturbing allegation that would change the course of his life forever. In April 2016, Oakman was arrested and charged with sexual assault after a woman came forward with accusations against him. The woman, a former acquaintance, alleged that Oakman had assaulted her in his apartment. According to her report, the assault occurred after the two had been drinking and socializing together. The woman claimed that Oakman physically forced himself on her, and she later reported the incident to the authorities. Oakman was arrested and charged with the crime, but he maintained his innocence throughout the ordeal, claiming that the encounter was consensual. The arrest and the nature of the allegations shocked the college football world. Oakman had been projected as one of the top defensive prospects for the upcoming NFL draft, and this accusation raised serious doubts about his character and his future in the league. Despite Oakman's success on the field, the allegations cast a dark shadow over his career, with teams hesitant to take a chance on a player now tainted by such serious accusations. As the legal process played out, the case became one of the most highly publicized in the world of college sports. Many feared that the charges would mark the end of Oakman's football career. Even though the NFL draft was just around the corner, teams were reluctant to take the risk of drafting a player facing such serious allegations. Ultimately, Oakman went undrafted in 2017, and his hopes of playing professional football were shattered. However, the legal case took another turn. In 2018, the charges against Oakman were officially dropped. After an investigation, it was determined that there was insufficient evidence to proceed with the case, and the prosecution concluded that the accusation could not be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The dismissal of the charges was a huge relief for Oakman, but by then, the damage had already been done. His name had been linked with the crime for years, and the public perception of him was forever altered. Though he was cleared legally, the consequences of the allegations remained with him. The damage to his career was immediate and lasting. Oakman had been one of the most promising defensive players in college football, but the sexual assault charge and the public scrutiny that followed effectively ended his prospects in the NFL. Despite attempts to continue his career, including stints in the Canadian Football League and other smaller leagues, Oakman never regained the level of attention and success he had once enjoyed. The media coverage surrounding the case and the years spent fighting the charges left a lasting impact on his reputation, overshadowing his college accomplishments. Oakman's story is a reminder of how one accusation can derail a career, even if the charges are eventually dropped. The fallout from the case highlighted the fine line that athletes walk when it comes to their public image. Oakman's success on the field, once the source of great promise, became irrelevant in the face of such serious allegations. Even when cleared of wrongdoing, the stain of the accusation remained. In the world of sports, the implications of allegations like these are profound. Whether or not the charges are eventually dropped, the damage to a player's career and legacy is often irreversible. For Oakman, the case left him with a tarnished reputation and a career cut short before it had a chance to reach its full potential. From murder conspiracies to assault and abuse, these athletes went from being celebrated icons to infamous criminals. We've seen how Aaron Hernandez's life was destroyed by the brutal murder of Odin Lloyd, a crime that led to his downfall and tragic end. Rae Carruth's involvement in a conspiracy to kill his pregnant girlfriend ended not only a life, but also his career, leaving a legacy stained by betrayal. Will Smith's death in a road rage incident shocked the NFL community, a tragic loss for his family and fans. Greg Hardy, with his multiple allegations of domestic violence, struggled to rebuild a career that had been tainted by his violent actions. Lawrence Taylor, a football legend, saw his Hall of Fame status crumble after his conviction for sexual assault of a minor. Antonio Cromartie's repeated allegations of domestic violence left his name linked with abuse, even though criminal convictions never came. And Sean Oakman, a promising college star, had his career derailed by accusations of sexual assault, leaving his NFL prospects shattered despite the eventual dismissal of charges. These cases aren't just individual tragedies. They are a reflection of a broader issue within the NFL, one that forces us to confront the darker side of professional sports. Each of these men had everything: talent, fame, and the world at their feet, but their violent actions destroyed everything they had worked for. Their stories highlight the extreme consequences of poor choices and unchecked anger. So, how has the NFL responded to these incidents? The league's handling of off-field violence has been a topic of much controversy over the years. Initially, the NFL faced criticism for its lenient punishments and inconsistent policies. Cases like Ray Rice and Greg Hardy forced the league to reevaluate its approach. The NFL introduced stricter suspension policies and revised its domestic violence protocols to ensure harsher consequences for players involved in violent crimes. Players like Hardy faced suspensions, some as long as a full season, while others were indefinitely banned from the league. In recent years, the NFL has made some significant efforts to address these issues. The league has worked to create more comprehensive educational programs aimed at preventing violence and promoting awareness about the importance of healthy relationships. However, critics argue that these efforts are still insufficient and that the league needs to do more to address the root causes of violence, including issues like mental health, trauma, and the physical toll of the game on players' behavior. Despite these efforts, the NFL continues to face challenges in balancing player rehabilitation with the need for strong accountability. The NFL's response to these incidents has not only shaped the league's internal policies, but also had a ripple effect on other sports leagues. The scrutiny placed on the NFL has prompted other organizations to examine their own policies around off-field behavior. The NBA, MLB, and other professional sports leagues have all implemented similar protocols for handling domestic violence and criminal conduct, understanding that their athletes' actions off the field can no longer be ignored. As player behavior comes under greater scrutiny, the public's expectations of athletes have changed. No longer are they just seen as entertainment figures. They are role models, and their actions off the field have consequences that reach far beyond the stadium. Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the NFL is doing enough to address off-the-field violence? Let us know. Your voice matters in this conversation, and we'd love to hear your opinions. See you in the next video.